It's a tale as old as time. The blonde girl who wants to be even blonder. She's coming in for her foil touch up and she says, I want to be so much blonder than I currently am. So today I'm going to show you what I do to make that happen. So stick around. So today we are going to be starting out with a mix of two lighteners. I'm going to be using Schwarzkopf Blonde Me and Blonde Orplex. I'm using quite a bit more of the Blonde Me than I am of the Blonde Orplex. And the reason why I'm adding them together is I do like that the Blonde Orplex helps the Blonde Me to stick to a foil better and prevent it from swelling. So I mix that together with 7 volume because look at this client's natural color. Why do we need more than 7 volume to start with our foils? We don't. She is getting so many foils put in that we definitely want to start with a lower developer because the foils are going to incubate and get warmer and warmer and speed up and get lighter and lighter. So we want to protect her hair as much as possible. As you guys know, because I am doing a blonding service, I'm also including K18 in her service, the mist and the mask as well, because that's a very important step to maintaining the integrity of the hair. Because guess what? Bleach is damaging. So I'm trying to make sure that my clients have as healthy hair as possible, especially when they're going from blonde to even blonder. So when that happens, there's going to be, some overlap with some of the hair. It's just going to happen. We can't expect it not to happen. This is not a perfect art form. It's chemistry mixed with art. And there are millions upon millions of little hairs on the head, and some of them that have been previously bleached are going to get bleached again. It's just inevitable. So what I'm doing here today is I have sectioned her hair into 5 workable sections. I have the mohawk up along the top, I have the 2 side sections, and I have the back split into 2. The back is split into 2 so that I can easily fit everything I need to in the foil rather than having a section that's too wide for my foil. You'll see as it gets up closer towards the top that it does start to widen out a little bit, even though this area here is a little bit more narrow. And it's because you don't really want to push past the wideness of your foils, because then that's when you're going to have too much hair in them. You're going to have some bleeding, some slippage. It's just not great. It's not great. So if you're finding that you're doing everything right, but maybe that's the issue that's causing some foils to slip, it's because you're cramming too much hair into the foils. It's opening up that top lip of the foil and causing it to slide down. That could be one of the things. So let's talk about what I do for a client when they want to be blonder. Every time you touch up the foils, it's not possible to get every single hair touched up the same way as it was last time, but there's essentially 3 ways you can do it. You can foil with more of the hair in the lightener foils, you can foil with less of the hair in the lightener foils, and you can foil with, trying to maintain the amount of hair you have in the lightener foils. If someone says what you did last time was perfect, just try to do the roots of whatever was previously foiled. Don't try to overfoil. But today, my client showed me that she wanted to be so blonde that I thought, okay, we have got to add in a lot more into these foils. And the way that we're going to do that, as well as making the foils pop, is that we're going to be doing a combination of slices and weaves. When I do weaves, I find that it makes the overall appearance very soft and lighter. But when you're using a lot of foils and you're trying to get that blonde to pop against the dimension of what's like considered the darker color, but there's not that much contrast between the light and the dark color, you need slices to create that dimension because it puts a direct big chunk, I guess, of the lightest next to the darkest. And as you guys can see, her natural color is like a level 7.5. And so it's not that dark, but we want to create some dimension while having this contrast in there. And the best way to do that is to have slices next to the leave outs. However, we still want to have a lot of blonding in there, and we don't want it to look stripy, where sometimes doing just slices can look pretty stripy. So we are doing slice, weave. And our weaves are maintaining, again, the softness that I was mentioning earlier, and the slices are getting that blonde pop. What I'm doing here with my foil board as well is I'm just doing my best to get everything that is dark and needs to be lifted up into the foil, and the foil board helps me to really plant down that hair and really saturate it. And I'm just noticing right now that my camera is having a little bit of exposure issues. I'm so sorry, guys. I hope there's not like, a flash warning that's needed here, but the foils are reflecting some light towards the camera, I guess, and it's just causing the exposure to go up and down a little bit. So I apologize for that. But when you are trying to make someone super, super blonde, essentially you can weave out the old blonde pieces and weave into the foil anything that has been left out for a long time, anything that is like the dark stuff. And you might be wondering if it feels like enough, and that just comes down to a little bit of time and experience. If you're like, oh, is there enough in the foil? And yeah, it's a little bit of a judgment call with foil to foil, I find, when I'm doing stuff like this. I'm kind of making judgment calls every minute here. I'm like, oh, is that piece going to be a piece that needs to be lifted? Or is it blonde enough that I can leave it out? And what you might be noticing throughout this video is that the stuff that I tend to leave out of the foil is stuff that was recently highlighted last time, like the highest up highlights, because then I can drop those out and whatever has grown in since then is going to be my quote unquote like shadow, my dimension, my shadow root, and everything that is dark right now and is kind of that medium level of blonde that has been previously blonded, whatever, that's all going into foil, and I'm bleaching as much of that as I can so I can get as much blonde up to the roots as possible. Now, some people are going to have some feelings about the fact that I didn't do a root shadow today, or root smudge, or whatever it's called. Whatever you want to call it, we all call it different things. And I have done a root smudge, a root shadow on this client before, and she's just not been a fan of it. She is the classic foils girly. She just loves to see those foils go right up to the top. And she does like it when I give them a little bit of a brushing upwards with the back of my brush, as you guys can see that I'm doing a lot of today. And that's going to give a little bit of blend and smudge, but not really a lot, but just enough for her that she feels like she's got classic foils in there and they're super high up without having that kind of deeper blonde root smudge that she doesn't really like to have. So now let's go on to the sides of the head. And what I like to do here is I like to follow the perimeter of what their hair is. Like I like to follow the natural line that their hairline creates. That's the words I'm trying to use. And what I like to do here for that super blonde pop is I like to do a couple of slices in a row back to back. And these slices are very thin, but because they're back to back and there's no drops, it kind of functions as one slice, but it's a little bit more blended than one bigger slice. Then I take a weave and I'm going to be continuing on with my pattern of slice, weave throughout the rest of the hair all the way up towards the back of that corner right there. I'm just following the hairline, and it's a very satisfying process to watch, in my opinion, watching the slices and the weaves, because you can just see how much blonde is going to be popping through here. And the reason why I like to follow this angle is because when she puts her hair up, it's just going to have this really soft effect. It's going to be very pretty, and we're not going to have like a bunch of lines in the hair that we're really going to see. Even though, again, yes, when you do put in slices, you get a little bit of a line. You're not going to get it as much when you follow along with the way the hair grows or the way that the hair is going to be styled. So when she wears her hair up, this is why this is put in that way. So it has that softness so that, you don't really see the lines. Also, another thing I should mention is as I'm going, I'm mostly continuing with 7 volume for my developer, but I'm adding a little bit of 20 in as I'm getting up towards these areas. Not the very front of the face, but kind of towards the back here. And for the top of the head, I'm adding some 20 volume in. The last few foils will be only 20 volume, but up until then, it's mostly 7 with a bit of 20 because, again, she's naturally light and her hair lifts pretty fast. And because I'm putting in so many foils, they're going to incubate very well, which means they're going to lift fast enough. And I don't really want to like add a lot of unnecessary speed into my foils when I'm having to take the amount of time that I'm doing today to put these in. Also, a little side note here. I tried something a little bit new today. I got a mic set up and I decided I wanted to film a little bit of ASMR for my foil service. So if you guys would like to see how this service was applied just with ASMR and kind of listen to the satisfying sounds of foils being applied, go check out the ASMR playlist on my channel because that will be on there as soon as I can. Now it's time to start with the top. This is how I like to actually section away the top so I'm not utilizing too much or handling too much of the hair all at once, is I separate it into like 4 or 5 sections and crisscross them over from side to side so that I'm only really handling one small section at a time. So again, this is going to be weave, slice, and I'm starting with a weave here because it's around the apex of the head and I want that softness in that area, and I'm not going quite as high up as I am with my other pieces in this, just so that has a little bit of room for that heat, because the apex of the head is one of those danger zones that tends to have foils slip really easily. So again, apex of the head, just scooch your foils down a little tiny bit, give it a little bit of breathing room, and you should be fine. Any of these pieces here that need to be lifted up, I am just, smudging on some more of the lightener onto them and flicking up the lightener up towards the root while trying not to give it too much of a hard line, because again, hard lines will be noticed in general, especially with slices, and feathering up with your brush is going to be the best way to soften that effect without having to do too many other color formulations, because some of us have a hard time with formulating things like root smudges because different color lines have different undertones and they fade differently on everybody's head. Not everyone likes to utilize a root smudge, and that's totally fine. And if you don't want to, then I recommend that you feather up your lightener up towards the roots there and just give it a little bit more breathing room than to put it right against the scalp. Like sometimes when you have some clients that want right against the scalp foils, sure, but I prefer to do a little bit of feathering and smudging myself. What you may or may not notice as well is that underneath I did a little bit more bold slices and weaves, and that's because I want my pops of blonde underneath to be a little bit more bold. I want everything up on this very mohawk section to be a little bit softer, and that's why my weaves are a little bit more of a medium to finer weave here, because I want a little bit of that softness. And I'm foiling in probably like 50+% of what's going from the weave into the foil, so that I have just a little bit more than half of what's in my weave pieces going into the foil. And that's because I do still want to have a little bit of her natural in here. And on this top layer, it's going to create some softness and some of those kind of low lights that go decently far down the hair using her natural hair, without having to have too many of the low lights underneath. And that just gives her like a balayage effect, I guess, where her ends and her underneath have that blonde pop to them, but we have the softer root in the top where she parts her hair. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get that blonde impact that you need throughout your mids and your ends that give you that balayage look while still having a softer looking root. And for anybody who's, just getting into hair and they're having a hard time figuring out how to connect foils, that is something we all kind of have to go through. It's pretty hard. I find that sometimes hair schools don't really teach stuff like that, is how to maintain and connect foils. They'll teach you how to put them in, but not how to refresh them when your client comes back. So I find that, again, follow the rule of if your client wants to be blonder, then you take all the dark spots and you lighten those and you leave out all the light spots from last time. If you put in a fair amount of light spots, that is, because then the roots that have grown out from those light areas will now serve as your rooty smudge, and the ends being blonde, you're going to have almost 100% blonding throughout the ends versus like 50 to 70% blonding in the roots. It's going to create a really soft, gradual blondness that's just going to be so pretty. So if you do it that way, then you're going to get more blonde, and it doesn't always have to be about connecting every single highlight the way that it was before into it, the same way again. That's a very hard thing to do, and I rarely even bother trying to do that. I more so just try to take it foil by foil, and with time and experience and doing the self-critiquing tool, 2 stars and a wish, I find that that's how I learn fastest. So if you are new to hair and you're interested in getting better, remember to self-critique and to allow yourself to have some grace, which is why we always do 2 stars versus 1 wish. It's 2 things you did good and 1 thing that you could work on and improve for next time. So again, For anybody new, I find that that's my most helpful tool possible. I'll tell you one thing though, I do have my wish right now. I wish that I chose the Framar brush that has the rat tail comb on it rather than the regular brush end, because it helps so much to section out your highs versus your lows when you're halfway through your foiling. Like when you put that root on and then you're trying to pick out those little darker bits with the end of your brush, the rat tail comb one helps so much more. So the brush choice matters a lot in your foiling and in your color applications, and I would take that into consideration too for any new stylist, is that the brush matters. The end of the brush, the tail of the brush, all of that. The brush bristles matter as well for blending and softness of roots if you're doing a root application. So please keep those things in mind. And like that's why I like to use the Framar ones personally, because they have a big variety of what they have out there for different color techniques. And yeah, I find different brushes are good for different applications. And keep in mind, any of these super blonde pieces, I am kicking out to the side and making sure that they're still, bleached down to where they have their previous roots, but still trying to kick those foils out, kick those pieces out of the foil so that I can make sure that they're not getting over processed or anything, while I can still feather down that color into the rest of the roots. So another thing to keep in mind for anybody who's concerned about over processing, just push the hair outside of the foil. Any other hair that's going to be in the foil has a chance of touching previous lightener, especially if you fold it on top of that old lightener. It's still going to lift a little bit. So even if you're like, oh, I didn't saturate it, but I laid it on top, it's still going to lift a little bit, and you can utilize that to your advantage. But if you really have some like level 10 pieces that you don't want to be bleached, again, just kick them out the side there. Now what I'm doing with the front here is I'm going to be doing a few slices in a row, like what I did with each of the sides as well. And the thinner and babier you take those slices, the more blendy and soft it's going to be, but they're back to back, so they still have that impact of like a bigger piece of blonde. So that's what I'm doing with these, is I am just using my 20 volume and Blonde Me mixed in with my like a tiny bit of the Wella Blonderplex. And I'm folding them twice and then just kind of pressing them onto the forehead to kind of bend around that area. They're not going to move. That's a pretty good way to lock them in there, and it keeps them out of the client's face and, preventing the client from pulling all those little hairs out of their face, because clients get an itchy nose if their hair tickles it, and then they pull their foils out, and that's the worst situation to deal with when you have bleach bleeds in the very front. Then after that, again, I'm just doing my weaves and my slices like normal, just to connect it to everything else I did in the head. But I am doing like more in the foil than I am with everywhere else, because again, I want to give it a little bit more of that blonde impact in the very front of the hair, where she's going to have like her money piece and her curtain bangs all in that same area. So if you're worried about the hair not processing altogether, don't worry, the heat from the head all rises, which is why I do the top last, because it's all the heat from her head and her body is all rising up, and it's going to make the top process even faster than everything else. Also, the way that I've laid those foils on top of each other, the incubation is higher than it is when the foils are dangling from the head. When they're all stacked up on top of each other, it's going to get warmer faster. So those highlights are going to process much, much quicker doing that. Then what I like to do always is, instead of using heat, I like to fold the foils onto each other, make sure that there is no bleach coming through those foils. There's no way that they're going to bleed. And then I take teeny tiny clips, little duckbill clips, and I like to make sure my foils are secure. I'm just very gentle with them. And then I lay a towel over top of my client's head, and the towel will keep it all nice and warm from the natural heat from her head and her body without adding additional extra aggressive heat. Now she's going to process for like 20 to 30-ish minutes, and then we checked her hair and she was ready to go into the sink. And we are doing her toner now. And again, if you want to see any more ASMR content, this one is also going to be available on my channel in the ASMR playlist, where I did her full shampoo at the sink. Here is my toner formula. It's 9.5 Ash Violet with 9.5 Ash Cendre and 9 Gold Gold. Those colors all blend each other out to make this really beautiful like warm vanilla, not even warm. It's just like a bright, creamy vanilla blonde. It is so beautiful. It's one of my favorite toner combinations because it has that, balance of barely there cool and barely there warm, just to tweak the formula a tiny bit for any of those super bright blondes that don't want to be icy and they don't want to be warm. They want to be right in the middle in that neutral, creamy vanilla color. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Have a great night, guys. Bye.